When you can detach yourself from all the expectations that life has set upon you or you've set upon yourself, and all the labels that other people have given you, you've given yourself, and you can detach from that, you then start creating what you want instead, as opposed to what you've been through and what people have labeled you as. So as I go forward, I learned that detachment is one of the best things that you can do, because detachment allows you to explore and discover. So I detached from all of that bullshit of the past, got rid of it. It was living there, of course, but I detached from it.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Need to Succeed podcast. Now, on this podcast, we have conversations with real successful people and really understanding what is it that makes them successful. There are decisions that we get to make at certain points in our life, and one person, based on certain circumstances, decides they're going to give up on life. And another person, based on the exact same circumstance, decides this is the very reason why I need to succeed. What is the difference between those two thought patterns? And that is exactly what this podcast is designed to do. And today we have got a phenomenal guest. This is a gentleman who is the founder of this success psychology. He has spoken on stages across the world. He is an international speaker. He is being a coach for the one and only Mr. Tony Robbins himself. And he has now gone on to create his own very, very successful program, Emotional Change Therapy, ECT. Can everyone please join me in welcoming the main man himself, Mr. Imran Ahmed. Imran.
Bro, that was amazing.
Welcome to the Need to Succeed.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome, my friend.
It's a brilliant introduction.
You're very, very welcome. It's great to have you here. Great to have you here.
Dude, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be in your presence, someone like you. But it's also nice to just have conversations, meaningful conversations, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have no doubt that this is going to be a phenomenal conversation.
It
Now,
will
look, we have got a tradition on this podcast. And the very first question, my friend, is what does success mean to you?
Good question. Everyone has a different definition. That's why you're asking the question. Success, to me, is going from failure to failure and finding the true treasure of what success really is. Because that's the reality of it. Many of us believe that there's this wonderland called success, and once you achieve that, that's it. You have entered the land of paradise. And as we know, success is driven by failure, is created by failure. Failure is the prerequisite to success. And to me, the more and more you can go through failure, the more you get used to failing, the more you are closer to success. And the true definition of success for me is living a meaningful life. If life isn't meaningful, and I've said this before, I would rather die a meaningful death than live a meaningless life. Because it's so true. Success in yourself, success knowing that you made a difference, success knowing that you came on this planet for a reason, but you fulfilled your purpose. You found your purpose, which is most people's biggest challenge, right? Finding what it is that's purposeful to them. But for me, it's like finding that purpose, living that purpose, and then finally being everything that you believe life was designed for you to be, and expressing that in any way that you can. That is the ultimate definition of success, because really, are we after success or are we after fulfillment? That's the feeling of success, right? That we feel fulfilled. So it's the feeling success gives, which is fulfillment. So there's a difference between the science of success and the art of fulfillment.
Wow. So just so many things to unpack in that, right? So many things to unpack in that, because, you speak about, is it the success or is it the actual fulfillment? And it's interesting because sometimes when you get to a certain position, it becomes more difficult to have certain conversations, because, now when I speak to people about money and I say, look, money really doesn't matter. Like, and it's difficult because I understand, you know, when I was in a position of lack, you know, when I'm coming from a position where I'm homeless, you know, someone trying to tell me money doesn't matter, I'm thinking, what are you talking about, right? You know, but the fact is, when you make money, you know, you understand that it isn't really about money. Now the money is there, now what? You know, how do you feel about life? You know, what are the decisions that you can now make to have a fulfilled life? And when you talk about success, not really being, you know, what is success? Is it more about success or fulfillment? It makes a lot of sense. The other thing you spoke about as well is failing to success, like just continually failing. You know, I did a reel about a couple of weeks ago saying, you know, Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times.
Yeah.
One of the most successful people that we've ever seen on this planet. And it isn't unique to him. The most successful people are the people that fail the most because they're not scared. They're willing to take the risk. And the more risk you take, the more you're going to fail.
Yeah.
But failure isn't a negative thing. Failure is now I know a way not to do it, and actually I've advanced. I'm moving more towards success, you know, which is absolutely phenomenal. You know, but you spoke a lot about fulfillment, right? Now, straight away I can tell you're a coach, you know, just in the way that you speak, you know, your mannerisms. Like, what is that drive for you to want people to feel fulfilled? Like, where does that come from?
Good question. And I think every one of us has a driving force inside of us. I found mine through many difficult circumstances. I found my driving force through adversity, and most of us do, let's be honest. My adversity started at a young age, so based on that adversity, I had holes inside of me growing up as a kid, growing up as a young teen. There were many holes, which means I wasn't whole. And I was given a broken version of me as I got older to other people to try and form relationships, to try and figure out why those holes were created. Number one. Number two, what can I do about them? And life doesn't give us the answers of what to do about them. School doesn't teach us what to do about them. University never tells us. What we do is we mask them. We mask those areas. However, if my focus stays in trying to fill the holes left inside of me, then I don't actually move towards doing anything for anyone else but me. So my driver was this. I grew up in fairly difficult circumstances. And I'm sure, just like many of us, we had challenge after challenge, question after question, which went unanswered. We had a myriad of things taking place around us whilst we're in the midst of this madness called life that no one really taught us or guided us through. And my purpose and that drive came at a very young age because I knew I was good at one thing. If I was good at nothing, because if I'm clear with you, I grew up with very little low self-worth and very little love. The two intrinsic human fears that we are born with, the need to feel worthy and the need to feel loved. And without those two, what do? We go crazy. We die. Ultimately, we are human beings. That means that the moment we come out of our mother's womb, we need to be attached to another human being instantly because it's oxytocin that is the hormone that allows us to go and actually want more love, actually want to give ourselves to someone else, actually become human. And as you know, you've got kids, I've got kids. As they get older, you see them slowly move away from the hugs and the kisses and that affection, right? Because the conscious mind now kicks in at the age of 7. I'm seeing it with my son. He's 6 now, and I'm seeing the differences that are playing out in his mind and how the conscious mind is slowly taking charge. So for me, a driver, as I got older, I realized something happened in my life, and there had to be a reason for every single one of those events. And if there wasn't a reason, I need to know why. So as I put the pieces of the puzzle together, the coincidences fell in place. As in, I thought there were coincidences, but let's be true in life. There are no coincidences. Those things had to happen in order for me to go and find myself. That's the truth.
So powerful because, you know, as I mentioned in the introduction, you have, been, a coach for probably one of the best personal development, coaches to have ever walked this planet. I'm almost speaking as if he's dead, he's still alive, but, you have, worked with, side by side with the best, right? It's actually something I heard from Tony Robbins when he speaks about, and it completely changed the way I viewed, myself, my character, because he spoke about your circumstances is actually what's created your blueprint.
Yep.
And that could be in relationships, that could be with money. Doesn't matter what it is, you can always track it back to your blueprint. Things that happened, the way you grew up, things that you saw, whether you felt they were going in consciously or not, they were going in and they formed, who you are today. Is that, old argument about nature versus nurture, right?
Yeah, there is that. And, going back to your initial statement about that world being formed, that blueprint, and that being formed through essentially issues, events, challenges, circumstances. But let's be honest here, most of us, we live in a world where we believe the world is what we think. That's our world. We create these mental maps of reality. And one of the things that obviously me and Jessen are working on as well is getting people to understand, we're part of ECT, get them to understand and realize that the world is what you think. Yes, that's your reality. But there's a world outside which is way beyond your thinking. The moment you step outside of your own reality, because let's be honest, we live in a world of duality. We have reality, our own mental maps of our world, and we have actuality, the truth. What's going on in our lives right now is probably irrelevant to what's happening in actuality, let's be honest. And the moment we shift and realize there is another world, we can expand our mental maps on the world. You mentioned about creating that blueprint. How come some people have a blueprint to success and some people have a blueprint to failure? And you mentioned as well about two people growing up in a similar environment. Let's talk about that. I grew up in a similar environment to other people, but I had different needs from other people. I created different meanings than other people created. That blueprint is created at a very young age, but it continues to be created and it can be changed at any point in someone's life. But what makes the difference to people is what are the dominant thoughts that are processed in their mind every day. We go through 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And the next day, most of the thoughts that we go through, 90% of them are recycled from the day before. So how are we ever given a new space to create a new map, to create a new element of this? If I said to you, here's a map, and it took you to the edge of a cliff, are you going to jump over? No. But if I said to you, hey, if you go a little bit further, there's a bridge. Now you can go and explore more territory. So the map is never the territory. The map is a representation of the territory of what you've been through. But like you said, your blueprint doesn't define you. Your blueprint is a map, an older version of you. And most of us, the biggest problem now in life is most of us are going around running on software, on maps that were created 20, 30, 40 years ago, and we've never updated them. And that's why we're running old patterns over and over again. And that's why people stay stuck in their problems and stuck in the past.
Amazing. I've heard you do some incredible things, really kind of digging into people, reasons why people are doing things and how they can really shift. Because like you said, the past is not a defining factor for the future or even for today. You get to make a choice today as to what the future is going to look like. Obviously, if you do nothing about it, then you're going to keep running the same patterns, but it is possible to sort of change that trajectory. Clearly, you've got a wealth of knowledge. You understand yourself very, very well, just listening to you. But let's just take it back a bit and just talk about Imran growing up.
Oh, no.
Right?
Oh, no.
Like, who was Imran growing up?
I thought we were going to miss that part.
No, I was enjoying the conversation, but, it's really about, like I said, the purpose of this podcast is to have conversations with people like yourself who, I admire and I respect. And
Thank
just
you,
really to get people to understand that, you know what, here's who this person was and here's where they are today. What's that gap in between? Because I was also here. You were also here, right? Many other people were also here, but they've ended up in a different place. Why have you ended up where you are? But when people can make that connection and understand where you're coming from, it's a lot easier for them to have hope for the future, for them to start making different decisions to create that new blueprint for the future, right?
Yeah. You're going to take me back. I know you're taking me back.
Yeah.
All right. Great question, great statement. I don't want to go back here, but let's go.
Yeah.
because it's important, right?
Cool.
It's
Well,
important.
look, if you don't feel comfortable,
No,
you
no.
know, obviously.
It's important.
Yeah.
That's the and let's unpack that a little bit, because you know, young me when I was 3, and I've processed this many times trying to figure this stuff out. There's either the questions going through my mind. So at 3, I'm given up by my mum. I don't know who my dad is at this point. I'm then given to a family that I don't understand the language they're talking about. I then grow up in an environment that is very suppressive and limited, religiously, culturally, and in many other ways.
When you say language, you're talking literal language?
Yeah.
Or just
So
literal?
the understanding of trying to be, you know, you're a 3-year-old. You don't, you know, you can talk, you can get some form of language through, but they spoke a different language which I didn't understand.
Okay.
So at that point, but I felt okay, like, you know, you're safe at least.
Yeah.
But I grew up with a lot of questions that were never answered because they didn't, in traditions, they would never answer those questions. And that's how they always felt. You don't really get to ask a question and receive an answer. So that level of guidance, and these are my footprints years, and every child has these footprint years from 0 to 7. And this is where they form this blueprint. This is where they form everything that happens in their life, because the unconscious mind is now in control. And the unconscious mind is 30 to 40,000 times more powerful than the conscious mind. It receives everything, it absorbs everything. So I'm now taking everything in my life, my surroundings, what's happened around me, the pains, the hurts, the questions, the challenges. I'm taking all of this in. And I don't know how to express it all, so I keep it inside of me as a child. I go to school, I have a very, very basic upbringing, similar to many of us that age in that era. Very basic. Literally every day is patterned, nothing new, no adventures, no excitement. Parks, very, very limited visits to the parks, no school trips because there wasn't enough money apparently. So you couldn't go on school trips. You couldn't really feel like it was to feel like being a child. Suddenly your questions were related to, what is it like? I feel like getting out of this because I want to be older. I want to do something because right now I feel limited. Anyway, my parents, my mum comes back into my life at the age of about 10. And she's my stepdad at this point, and she's been married 3 times. And I now have a younger stepbrother. I didn't know this until I met her, and he's like 3 years old. So this was creating this new environment. Now I thought for myself, I thought, great, this is amazing. Like now we have a new lease of life. Like you can create a family, you can have joy, you can be a child. And what I ended up doing for the next probably 2 years at least, we were probably going around from place to place, and they were committing fraud. And this was through credit cards. It was very easy at that time. I didn't realize, but I learned quite quick as a kid. Right? All you had to do is give them this plastic card, and there's this dodgy old machine, and it just seems to swipe whatever amount you want. Right? I thought, wow, what a concept.
Sounds good, right?
So I learned a lot.
What, 8 years old?
Getting stuff for free, right? I learned how to succeed and be resourceful if you ain't got the money. Right? So I saw all this go on, and it formed part of my world, part of my blueprint again. My conscious mind obviously kicked in at the age of 7, 8, and I started consciously becoming aware of things. So everything I'd absorbed between 0 to 7 had created this map. Now I'm living that map, but now I'm seeing new experiences take place around me. So the next couple of years of that, they go to prison. So everything changes. They're both, mum and stepdad are in prison at this point. I then go back into the care system, come back out, me and my older brother, we come back out. Then we live with them in Southampton. So I suddenly get moved to Southampton. So I'm thinking, okay, this is now cool. But the problem is we're living in the worst of the worst council blocks. Yeah? We've seen some council estates in our lives, right? This was like the worst of the worst council estates that you could ever find. I had never come from a place like that. So to me, I felt like I was in a zoo, right? There was a St. Mary's, this is St. Mary's in Southampton. There was a school opposite St. Mary's School. I was supposed to be in go to middle school.
I went to
my
uni in
final
Southampton, so I know
Okay.
St. Mary's actually.
So you know St. Mary's.
Yeah, I know St. Mary's here.
Yeah, so in the year sort of 1990, that's when St. Mary's was rife. The 80s and 90s, it was rife. So I used to be around that area. Again, it took me a little while, and then what happened was I was due to go to secondary school at this point. I got expelled from middle school for fighting. there were a lot of fights. There were
Yeah.
fights all the time.
Yeah.
People wanted to pick on you. They wanted to pick on the color of your skin. They wanted to pick on the way you look. They wanted to pick on your clothes. You know what kids are like, man.
Yeah.
They just wanted to do stuff. And my initial reaction was always to put up a fight. So I did. And obviously I got expelled from it and all the other things. Anyway, I move over to secondary school, my first year in secondary school. And this is where things started changing, because now my mum and my stepdad are addicted to crack. I had no idea what this substance was. I had no idea what these things called drugs were. But they went and found the worst of the worst, right? They could have gone for one of the easier
Weed
ones,
stuff.
right?
Yeah,
They could have
yeah.
gone for an easier one,
Yeah.
right? That you can wake up from the next day and be normal again. They went from the one where you stay in a trance or a state for 7, 8, 9 days. And that continued. And by this point now, I've got a young sister. She's about 6 months old. So the next few years were really finding a way to look after her, because they were never around. That part of it was pretty horrible, because you're looking for an elder, you're looking for an uncle, an auntie, someone to take over, and no one's around. And you're 11 years old, and you've got to try and figure out, how do I feed this kid, this baby? But not just that, how do I feed myself? How does my older brother and my younger brother now eat? How do they eat as well? So you had to become super resourceful. There was no room for failure. You could not fail in this stage, because everything relied on you. So I had to make clear, concise, and conclusive decisions at that point to say, this is what I want to do. And I never did this before, so I started doing it then. And that was stealing. So I thought, okay, let me start off with milk, because that's what we need, right? Milk and food, basics, that's what we need.
So is this when you said these are basics, right? So you saying they're going away for days?
Yeah,
And you're
7,
literally
8
having to
days
look
at a
after your-
time, 7, 8, 9, 10 days. And even when they came back, they weren't in any fit state to do anything.
Yeah.
So what did it really mean? I still remember now, because when you've got a little one, and you remember when they're 6 months old or whatever, you've got to change your tops every couple of hours, because they're just yakking up all over you, right? So I still remember that I ran out of tops, so I was looking for clothes, and in the end I had to find, I think it was my mum's old maternity dress, right? And I'm wearing that because there's nothing left, right? And there wasn't. And the reason for that is there was no one in the house to wash. I didn't know how to do the washing, so I had to learn all these things. Right? These are concepts that I had to pick up and learn. And I suppose hardship made me do that. Hardship caused that. Adversity allowed me to be someone else or be more resourceful. So I started doing this, food initially. And then I thought, okay, this is good, but if I do this too often, I'm going to get really fat, right? So, the easiest stuff to nick is pies and pasties and things like that. So you do it too often, you're going to cause yourself some trouble. But it didn't stop there. It started moving from that to then thinking, well, great, this is a concept. Go and get stuff for free, you can get more. So I started getting orders in from other people. Aftershaves, perfumes, DVD. Do you have DVDs, VHSs at that time? That's right. VHS. So, HMV, I'm surprised, they did go down eventually. I'm surprised it didn't go down then, because that HMV in Southampton, I'm sure you've been there. Man, we were in there like 3-4 times a day. And, there's it was a little setup, a couple of people looking out for what's going on, any security guards around, that sort of thing. Right, boom, let's get it done, and let's get out of it.
So by this time you'd brought your friends into it.
Yeah, like about a year or so into it, I thought, okay, I need to upscale this. I need to succeed at this stuff. Yeah, this is now giving me some rewards, right? Create something. So then clothes. It moved on from clothes to larger items. I mean, even one stage, I walked out with a television. But anyway, that's just some of the crazy things that happened, and it was on a regular. It didn't happen just now and then. This was daily. Like you wake up in the morning, you go out. You're on the hunt, right? Your food cupboards are stocked up. Next thing is, how do I get clothes for the little one, for ourselves? How do we get items? Now, how can we get items that we can sell for money in return? So again, that system started getting set up. And then it moved on to car stereos as it got older. It moved on to smash and grab in terms of car stereos. And I don't know how many poor windows we put through in order to get those stereos out, and how many people woke up to a car that had wires hanging out back then, a cage that probably blood left over, because back then it was tough to take these things out. You know, it was challenging, but I pretty much was able to grow up on my own from that point, because I was like, what it taught me was this, is that life is unexpected, right? I can't expect anything from life. I had expectations and they didn't come to fruition. So I have to have a lack of expectation. I've got to do what needs to be done in this moment. I've got to act upon now. I've got to take leadership. So all of these things, which I don't know what they were called, gave me the courage to be able to do something. And in all honesty, what did I really have to lose? Not much, because what was life like? It was bad.
Were you processing this? So at this stage, were you talking 13, 14, 15?
Probably we're talking 13 at this stage.
Are you processing this like, what do I have to lose? Or is it just a case of we're waking up, there's what needs to be done, and we're just getting it done?
I would go into fights and I would be the one who say, right, got nothing to lose, let's do this. Now you don't want to go, that's the worst person you ever want to go into a fight with, that hasn't got anything to lose, because they're willing to give it up, all up in that moment. And it's crazy, but as a kid I just felt this, and it came from somewhere. You know, you mentioned Blueprint, it came from there. At that young age, and I've mentioned this a few times, we used to watch, there used to be these Bollywood movies playing, and even though people call me Mr. Bollywood and all this stuff, but there used to be these Bollywood movies playing. And these Bollywood movies in those days used to have a moral and a message. And that moral and a message stuck with me. That moral and a message from watching the likes of Dilip Kumar, this great actor, Amitabh Bachchan, the values it taught.
I've heard of him, he's a big one, right?
Yeah, Amitabh Bachchan's a big B. But their movies back in the 80s on morals, on mission, on purpose, on reason. And it didn't come out in that way, but there were intrinsic values that were tied in to those movies. I never saw them at the time, but I realized them when they were violated. And when I was out and someone violates my space or violates my value, I picked up my self-worth from a lot of that, realizing that you ain't gonna dominate me. You can try, but you ain't gonna, because if I know no one else has got respect or value for me, but I have some, that's enough for me to stand up for myself. And at this point, I've now created a number of different experiences that have stacked upon each other to give me the courage to go fight through. So from that point, like I said, those fights began. Then I go to school and I'm thinking, okay, year 8, great, I want to start school. This is going to be a new start. What happens is I end up in a system of racism, a school full of racists, and they're 3-4 years older than me. So there was fight after fight after fight, because I was the only Asian kid that was willing to stand up against it. Now, I didn't care. Like I said to you, I didn't care. For me, it was standing up for what's right. You know, die a meaningful death and live a meaningless life. And for me, it was right. That moment was right. Standing up for myself is right. If I look back now, I think I was crazy. I just think I was crazy. For a kid to have those thoughts, have that strength, have that insight into knowing, well, it didn't matter what happened, I will stand for my values. That meant something. So once that took place and all of this madness happened, I was in fight after fight. I got expelled in year 9, didn't do my SATs, didn't do any GCSEs, was then literally a no-hoper. So I started working on labouring sites and, you know, £12 a day, just like moving stuff, bricks, mortar, all of this into skips, hot, sweaty, all day long. Then I started getting into jobs where I was cleaning toilets, and that was probably one of the worst, man. Just you don't want to be in those jobs.
But at this stage, you know, you haven't done your SATs, you haven't done your GCSEs, like society-wise, like you're written off, like you're done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. For them, I was. Remember this, right? When you grow up in that environment and people don't know who your mum and dad are, that's enough for you to be done. That's enough for you to be a no-hoper and a loser. That's enough for you to get picked on by every single person around, because they know that you have a lack of self-worth, or they perceive you being less worthy, because their value of you being a worthy human being is you know, looking like them, you know, having a family like them, doing the things they do. Anyone less than that becomes less in everyone's perception and their eyes. So yeah, I did. I had to reduce myself. they reduced me in their eyes. But for me, even though I had to be seen in that way from them, it didn't bother me at that point because there were bigger pressing issues that I had to deal with. But society did write us off. And it's interesting because after, this is like what we do generally in society. We see someone makes a mistake. And more recently, let's just talk more recently, and this is something that's out in the news, but look at more recent Anthony Joshua's loss, yeah? Just relating to that, Will Smith's slap. Okay, so these guys stay consistent in their careers for 20 odd years, 10 odd years. They're consistent throughout. They're winning. And a moment, just one moment of madness, one moment of failure, we judge their entire being on that one moment. That's wrong. That's human beings for you. That is now perceiving someone through the prism of judgment. Yeah. And that's what we do. We write them off. Now Will Smith is written off. Now Anthony Joshua is written off. Now I'd love to say I'm not a fan of both. I love what they do. I see them as inspirational figures. But I'll never write them off. Don't ever write anyone off. The moment you write someone off is the moment you've lost. Because they can come back. Their blueprint can change. They can become a better human being. They can change their needs, their beliefs, their values, their behaviors, their actions, get better results. If you're sitting there judging constantly, that's all your position is in life. You're just an armchair judge watching everyone else.
There's a lot of that going on these days.
There is, right? A lot of people throw judgments left, right, and centre. Yeah. This is one of the biggest challenges that our generation and generation after us faces, teens face. Because now we don't have time to spend receiving more evidence or information to come to a judgment. We come to it instantly.
There's too much noise.
You looked at me the wrong way, that means you hate me.
Yeah.
You didn't say hey to me, you didn't like my post on Facebook, that means you don't like me. Like, come on, these complex equivalences, this madness that we've created in terms of these patterns, we've picked up based upon external gratification that we get from that we're looking for from the outside world. And if we don't get it, we create meaning out of it. And one of the biggest things I think I've learned from Tony Robbins along the way is that very word, meaning. He always used to bang on about it. I was like, what do you mean by we create meaning? And then it sort of struck in my sort of teens, it struck me what he meant. Everything has meaning. This moment right now has meaning. Those two kids that grew up in the same environment but became different, they gave that event a different meaning. I gave the event that I went through a different meaning. And I knew there was something better on the other side. And if truth be told, I knew that the man upstairs, the universe, whatever you want to call it, has my back. And always has. And I felt that throughout my life. That even if there's no one behind me, there's someone that's always got my back.
Like even as you were growing up 11, 12, 13, you always had that innate belief. And where does that come from? Is that from religion? Is that just from spirituality? Like where does that come from? Because someone just going through what you've described, you've pretty much kind of said society's kind of given up on you. Even people looked at you as lesser. So that would almost, generally people in those circumstances, and trust me, I know exactly what you're talking about. When I'm sat there and I'm homeless, all of these sort of things, I'm still there at 9. I've still got all of these visions, all these goals, all this like, I'm gonna do this. You just wait. I'm gonna do that. So I get it, but where did that come from? Like, was that religion? Was that just something within you, or was that what was that based on?
I think, if I'm brutally honest, it was a feeling, a deep feeling of certainty inside myself, and that faith came from within. There were situations that played out in front of me that I could never imagine them turning out the way they did. But that's pure faith. That's having that higher power to say something bigger is waiting for me. For everything I went through, I knew that every storm has an ending. And I could see through the storm. One thing I could always see was through the storm. Even right now, I'm going through one of the biggest storms in my life. But I know I can see through it. I know I can see through the other side of it. And that's what faith is all about, you see. Faith is something that we always tie into religion. And yes, I believe religions give you power. Like, you choose the right religion, the one that's right for you, and you feel faith at a different level completely. Because what it does, it connects you to something higher and greater than you. Most people are serving themselves only. The moment you go into a form of whether it's spirituality, a religion, you feel a sense of faith, you know you're serving something greater than you. And I think it allowed me to do something for someone greater, to serve something greater than me. Even if that was facing the bullies at school, serve something greater than me. This is going to teach you that next time you're never going to be able to get away with this for a guy that's my color. I'm not even that brown, but anyone brown, right? Because we appeared in the newspapers, it was that bad, the kickoff that took place. And I remember that thinking that, was that entire experience worth it? Was it for you guys? Was it worth it? How do you feel now after thinking you picked on a kid, made him lose his schooling, made him lose those years of, I couldn't be at home because home was mad. This was my home. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, right? Coming to school, learning things, creating a life. And what do most people need to get out of bad circumstances is an education to get out of the environment, to break free. I needed that education, but that got taken away from me as well. So you know these leases of life I keep saying, they keep getting taken away. Every time they got taken away, I wanted to find, okay, well, what's the next one? I got disappointed, of course. I felt it. It hurt. But what's the next lease of life? So I kept looking forwards again. So that got taken away. All right, now what do I need to do? I need to earn money. I need to work, find a job. So I started, at the age of 14, I started working on the doors. Now you couldn't get a license then, but I looked older than my age. I was bigger. So I got a doorman license, started working on doors at 14, 15, 16, 17, throwing big guys out, started jiu-jitsu, martial arts, got more confidence, had more faith in myself. I gave myself self-worth. And that's when things started changing. So after that, I decided, right, I want to do something bigger, moved to London. I got noticed by a few people. I was on stages in London. I'm like 18, 19 at this stage.
When you said, I just rewind that a little bit, because when you say you were on stages in London, I mean, this is not, you can't just walk up the street onto a stage.
Yeah,
right?
It was a bit like that, to be honest, because one of
Really?
my first stages was Wembley Arena. No,
Wow.
That was second. First was Wembley Conference Centre.
Okay.
Now you've got about 2,000 people just watching you. And the Wembley Conference Centre used to be a conference centre where you'd come in and you'd hone in on, it was a dome, you'd hone in on just the stage. So normally musicians and I suppose poets and speakers used to come there for sessions. So I'm doing a performance on stage at this point. So I started doing acting.
Okay.
And I'll go into that as well. There's the reason for that. So I started doing acting. It felt like I wanted to be everyone but myself. I knew myself wasn't worthy in the outside world, so it felt like I had to wear a mask to protect my world to some degree. But I came to London, so check this. I came to London.
But I would even say, I don't mean to cut you off there, but even in that, for me personally, understanding the environment you would have been in, choosing to go into acting, that actually shows a lot of confidence to me.
There was confidence there. Yeah.
Like whether you realised it or not, there's got to be an element of, because it's not something that people from the background you described would choose to go into. Right, I want to go and start doing acting. Do you know what I mean? It would be looked at in a certain way. So you obviously knew yourself enough to say, I want to do this stuff. Or I mean, how did that come about?
Again, when you can detach yourself, and this is the key to this, and this is the key learning behind all of this, when you can detach yourself from all the expectations that life has set upon you or you've set upon yourself, and all the labels that other people have given you, you've given yourself, and you can detach from that, you then start creating what you want instead, as opposed to what you've been through and what people have labeled you as. So as I go forward, I learned that detachment is one of the best things that you can do, because detachment allows you to explore and discover. So I detached from all of that bullshit of the past, got rid of it. It was living there, of course, but I detached from it. And how I created that vision, because remember, when you've got nothing to lose and you have everything to gain and you can detach from your previous circumstances, you can do great things, because you're not fixated by the forms and the shapes that society creates about being a good husband, because that's gone out the window. Who's going to want to marry you with knowing the family you've had and the background you've been through? Let's be honest. What do you really have to give the world? How are they going to believe you until you become something? So my job was this. And it happened really, and I'm going to be candid with you about this, because this happened about the age of 13. Whilst all this rubbish is going on, I remember receiving my first Oxfam. This letter came through, this Oxfam donation that I used to give to, and we used to, in Uganda, I'd sponsored some children to, found drinking wells and homes and education. And this young girl used to write to me, and it used to fill me up, right? I didn't have a lot of money, but I knew that £3 out of my Midland account back then was okay. It was possible. And there was a sense of doing something for other people that gave me, I spoke about fulfillment?
Wow.
Gave me that fulfillment. It wasn't success,
Wow.
It was fulfillment. And I started realizing as life went on, why do I want to do this? I didn't want to become an actor. Part of it was I wanted to become an actor to feel worthy, to feel significant. Part of it was, actually, if I became an actor, imagine the impact I can have on other people's lives. And my whole premise was, when I became an actor, whatever I earn, 50% has to go to charity. That was my thing. And this is what I mean. I still go back and think, who made this up? How did I even think these things up? I had no idea,
This
right?
is free labor.
But I thought to myself, right, if I get a job, 50% of that goes straight to charity, right? So I even remember this. I'm in Mumbai in India, and I'll come back to how I got there in a minute. And what I used to do is stand outside. There's a place called Bandra, and outside there would be a restaurant where homeless people used to queue up. And you would literally go and give 1,000 or 2,000 rupees at that time, probably the equivalent of maybe £20. And you would feed about 50 people with rice, with curry, with lentils, all of this sort of stuff. Yeah, you just keep feeding them. So for me, I realized how great that felt. So those feelings just kept stacking on top of each other, one after the other, those feelings of giving, of pouring into other people, of providing for others, or doing things for others. And I think that just paved the way for everything after that.
Wow. Now, what I can't sort of get away is you, at the age of 13, going through what you're going through, actually still sparing some money to give, that in itself is a blueprint for who you are within you, right? That's just something that can't really be built. It's your sort of circumstances made you realize actually there are still people who are probably going through this or worse off, wherever you're getting that money from, obviously from, whatever you were doing, but you still had that money. You're like, you know what, I would really want to share this, which is just incredible. You went on to do your acting, got onto stages, your first day, 2,000 people. Like, how did you feel in that moment?
Felt like God,
Yeah.
right? Felt so worthy. I came off stage. That was the first time. The second time I truly felt like a Greek god, right? I had 10,000 people screaming at me, right, in Wembley Arena.
What are you doing, dancing, acting?
I'm doing acting and dancing skit at this point, right? I'm at 10,000 people screaming my name. I don't think all those 10,000 were. Maybe a few of them were, the ones I could hear. But what it was I remember looking around and thinking, wow, like 5 years ago, I could never imagine this. 3 years ago even, I didn't even know this is possible. I manifested it. And everything that happens in my life, I manifest. I take accountability for everything, the good and the bad. The bad needed to happen for me to see the good. The 13-year-old that you mentioned looking at Oxfam and trying to create a better life for other children, that gave me the impetus and the drive. My problems, what I went through, gave me the empathy towards other people. Because remember, I'm kicked out of school. I got no books. The books I picked up, I stole. And there were 4 little pocket books. One was Martin Luther King, one was Muhammad Ali, one was Malcolm X, and one was Bob Marley. Okay? And I listened to the stories of their life, and I learned the lessons of what they had been through. And you know what? My life was nothing in comparison to the hardship that they had faced. And it put my life into perspective. And I said to myself, if they're human, and they have also been dehumanized, let's be straight here, way more than I've ever been dehumanized. They have been dehumanized. They've seen things I could not even imagine. They've been through experiences I could never even feel. So if I can do something with what I've been through, similar to what they've been through, because they were men on mission, let's be honest, the mission for them was bigger than the man. Whether you look at Martin Luther King, you look at Muhammad Ali, you look at even someone like John Lewis, you look at someone like him who, again, the civil rights, and you look at the movement that they created, it was phenomenal. Bob Marley, He came here on this planet, he died at the age of 36, but in 36 years he had more of an impact than people that have lived entire lives. He came for one reason, and most of these people came for one reason. Muhammad Ali taught us so much about character and charisma. Martin Luther King showed us what it felt like to be in control of your emotions no matter who's in front of you, to be in charge of how you feel, as long as you get to the outcome, whatever you're trying to get through, and you do it in the right way, you do it with integrity, because he taught us values as well. That man who people think is dead and doesn't have any more of an impact, his time, and all of these men, and many women during that time as well, because I had books on, I had books on Mother Teresa at that point, I had books on Diana, and I used to look at their life and think, wow, this is fascinating to see what they have, but they will be etched into the memory or the fabric of time forever, should we say, because of what they've achieved. And many of them came from nothing and achieved things much greater than them. And what did it take? It took them aligning with their purpose. That's what got them there. So for me, when I read these books, it put my problems into perspective. And then I realized that I've got to live a life that's greater than me. So what can I choose as an outcome that's bigger than me? You know that great quote, if you reach for the moon, if you don't even reach it, you land on the stars, right? So you live amongst the stars. I was like, if I reach for that and I don't even get there, that's cool. I'll still elevate myself in life. So part of my thing was achieving or looking at some crazy outcome because I've detached from the madness of the past. I don't need that stuff, but I also can do so much more for others in the future. And that's how that sort of, all that blueprint sort of formed and shaped and panned out over the many years.
Wow, that's incredible. And I can see when you start talking about the people who've sort of inspired you through the books you've read, I can obviously see why you think the way that you do, right? And obviously why you're trying to create change in the way that you're trying to create change as well, because these are people who have left an impact in this world. And going back to what success means to you, fulfillment, that really makes a lot of sense. We've got a final question. So we are where we are today.
Yeah.
You've lived your life. You've been able to get to where you are today. Like today, what is your need to succeed?
Good question. Again, it changes, doesn't it? Circumstances change. People change, life changes. But as long as you keep grounded and firmly hold your purpose and your outcome, you'll always get there. So my drive today, and this is why what me and Jessen have created with ECT, and what we're doing with this emotional change therapy to be able to drive it through, the difference that we can make and the impact and the power that we have as human beings, as individuals, that can inspire, but also help other people find what it is that they're struggling to find, which most people are struggling to find, to being human again, to actually know what it means to be human, to know what it means to express their emotions rather than suppress them, to know what it means to live a life of freedom and have a meaningful existence. Because some of the greatest lessons, even someone like Viktor Frankl, and he suffered throughout years of being in Auschwitz, and his book Man's Search for Meaning was so important. It's meaning. It's the meaning that we create. Why do for instance, Jessen and I coming up with emotional change therapy and this groundbreaking new therapy that we're sending out through the world, why do we want to do it? For money? No. For impact, for purpose, for reason, for help, for support, for love. These emotions that we grew up as men being told we shouldn't really experience that often, or we should suppress, and we suppressed it for so long. Now you come to a point where you can express all of this. And let's be honest here, bro, life ain't getting any easier. Mental health problems are rising. Adolescents, 15 to 29-year-olds, suicide rates are off the scale. Depression, anxiety, PTSD. These are areas of things that are taking place in people's lives right now that are real, and they don't know how to deal with it. Many of us grew up without a manual for how to deal with your mind. But everyone knew everything about everything else but themselves. 16 years of study, of going through the schooling years and then going to university. And guess what? You come out of there learning about every aspect of everything else but you. Yeah, you may have developed, but how do you know how to deal with problems that you face? So what is driving me now, the need to succeed, is number one, create an absolutely meaningful life whilst I'm on this planet. Number two, part of that meaningful life includes people. So people are part of that. Their purpose is tied into my mission. And number three, leave this world that one day I can look back, or maybe even on that last day, that I can look back and that final day and you say, you know what, because there's three questions we can ask. Did we live enough? Did we love enough? Did we give enough? And I can look back and I can answer all those three questions. And I can look my kids square in the eye and the people around me, friends, family, close people, square in the eye and say, you know what? Life didn't give me what I expected it to give me, but I got what I want and I had to fight for it, but I had the courage and there was a need to succeed. So I could go from problem to problem and adversity to adversity, so that now I can reach down and teach someone else who's going through adversity, say, hey, dude, it's cool. Right now, pull yourself up, or her. You know, she's going through a challenge. She's going through a problem in her relationship. She's going through a problem in her mental health. And say, hey, it's going to be okay. This is life. Life comes with unexpected circumstances that we all have to deal with. Here's a few lessons and a few tips and a few tools that are going to serve you through the rest of your life. And I tell you what, if I can teach you that, I teach you how to be independent for the rest of your life, and you go and teach that to someone else. If I tell you what to do, you're going to be dependent on me. So the need to succeed now is to impart this knowledge, this wisdom, these tools, these life-changing strategies onto others, creating a ripple effect so they can go out and create massive change in the world. Because if people have ever needed change, it's now.
Wow.
That's the truth.
Imran, thank you very much. That was brilliant.
Thank you, bro.
Awesome, man.
Cheers, bro.
That was it, bro.